I just did my mid-year reset and it reminded me you don't have to wait for January 1st to get your life organized. Here's the thing nobody talks about when it comes to planning and goal setting. Most of us are terrible at knowing what we actually want. We are conditioned to care more about how we're perceived than how we see ourselves. We set goals based on what looks good on Instagram, what our parents expect, what society tells us success should look like, and then we wonder why we can't stick to our plans or why achieving our goals doesn't feel as satisfying as we thought it would. I realized this a few years ago after arbitrarily setting the same goals for the 5th year in a row and making no progress on any of them. I realized I'd been carrying around goals that weren't even mine. I was chasing things because I thought I should want them, not because they actually aligned with my vision for my life. And that year I made some big changes, and most of it was devaluing goals that simply weren't important enough for me to actually take action on. And that left so much space in my brain to work towards things I really wanted. But unplugging from societal pressures are no joke. So I've got some exercises I lean on every time I need a reset. They're in the planner, but you can also grab a piece of paper and do these that way. Let's go ahead and get into it. The first exercise I do in any reset is a life evaluation. This isn't about judging yourself, it's about getting honest with where you are right now and where you want to invest. I go through different key areas of my life: career, relationships, health, finances, personal growth, and any other categories that are important at the time. And then I write where I am. This gives me a very clear picture of how I really feel about every facet of my life. I read this amazing book by Susan Jeffers that I would highly recommend to anyone called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and she has a section on a whole life grid. She talks about if you put too much emphasis on only one area of your life, like a relationship for example, and that falls apart, you might feel like you've lost everything. But when you have a balanced life full of lots of different things, if one part doesn't get worked out, you still have the other parts to fall back on, and you still retain your overall sense of fulfillment. So I like to do this to remind myself to invest in multiple areas of my life. Next comes big picture journaling, and this is honestly my very favorite exercise because it bypasses all of the shoulds and gets straight to the most important thing. The prompt is, imagine your ideal life in 5 years or in 10 years, and are you on that path? You can get really deep with this and think about what will matter to you when you're looking back at the end of your life too. The first time I did this, I wrote things down I'd never admitted to myself before. Goals I'd been way too scared to say out loud because they didn't fit the image I thought I should project. And this is where you discover the difference between what you want and what you think you should want. And that difference, that's everything. This is the most valuable stuff to do before you set goals, so you truly have a handle on what actually matters to you. So now you know what you want, how are you gonna get it? The truth of the matter is, if you can't incorporate it into your routine regularly, it's just simply not going to happen. So I created the Ideal Week exercise, which bridges the gap between your big dreams and your actual daily life. This is not about planning a perfect fantasy week. It's about designing a realistic week that actually moves you towards your real goals. You map out your weekly tasks and routines in a way that supports who you want to become, while acknowledging who you are and what your current goals are. In my first reset, I realized my ideal week looked nothing like my actual weeks. I was saying I wanted to prioritize creativity, but I wasn't setting aside any time for any creative work. So things had to shift. But be honest with yourself, not everything can shift at once. Your work schedule or your school schedule, for instance, might just be what it is. That's how it was for me. So I knew it wasn't realistic to say, I'm gonna block a chunk of time on a Monday night after work to work on my creative goals. I knew looking at my schedule realistically, my energy would just not be there. But since it was such a priority for me, I might need to look at how I spend my weekends versus how I would spend them if I wanted to make some progress. I literally can't even tell you how revolutionary this was for me at the time. And that year I started to focus in and be realistic. It literally changed my life. And I do resets like this all the time to make sure I'm auditing my time and spending it intentionally. Finally, the vision board. But it isn't just pretty pictures. It's a real tool that can give you a peek into your future if you use it that way. I create mine digitally and I like to make my annual vision board really strategic. I only use images that represent what I actually want, not what looks impressive or what I think I should want. And since I like to make vision boards for fun too, I also have monthly ones in my planner so I can also make seasonal boards just for fun. The magic happens when all these exercises work together and informs your daily and weekly routines. The life life evaluation shows you where you are, the journaling reveals where you want to go, and the ideal week makes it practical, and the vision board keeps you motivated. And once you've got your vision clear, everything flows. Now when you set goals for yourself, they are intentional, and you can turn them into smaller targets like your quarterly goals, your monthly goals, and ultimately your weekly actions and daily habits. And these are the pages where the rubber hits the road for me. But it's so much easier to stay on track when you know exactly why you're taking action. Here's why this approach is so different from traditional goal setting. It starts with self-knowledge instead of external expectations. Most planning systems ask you to set goals and then figure out how to achieve them. But if you don't know what you actually want, you're just creating elaborate to-do lists for someone else's dreams. And if you're wondering why you never make progress, that's exactly why. Someone else's vision for themselves is never going to be enough for you to make a change. These exercises force you to get clear on your own definition of success before you start planning how to achieve it. And when your goals are actually aligned with your values and your desires, everything becomes easier. You stop procrastinating because you're working towards something you actually want. You stop feeling guilty about changing direction because it's based on your new self-knowledge and you're not just giving up. Most importantly, you stop feeling like you're constantly swimming upstream because you're finally moving in a direction that feels right for you. So here's my challenge for you. Before you set another goal or make another plan, get clear on what you actually want. Do the life evaluation, be honest about where you are, do the big picture journaling, write down what you really want, not what just sounds good, design your ideal week, and make your dreams realistic and totally doable. And remember, you can do this anytime. You don't need to wait for January or Monday or the perfect moment. The best time to get clear on what you want is when you're ready to be honest with yourself. And then once you're clear on where you're going, I do monthly plan with me videos to make it cute along the way. So if you want support in the process, make sure you're subscribed. And if you try these exercises, I'd love to hear what you discover about yourself. Sometimes the biggest breakthrough is realizing what you don't want as much as what you do. Figure out what you actually want, and the rest becomes so much easier. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.